Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to Inside America, the show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In today's episode, Donald Trump's Greenland obsession. The president says anything short of US control of the Arctic island is unacceptable, pushing Europe to its diplomatic limits. Coming up, we examine the motives behind the threats and look at what the consequences could be.
It's hard to understand how an organization, an alliance like NATO could survive if one ally hostilely engages another.
And we ask if anyone besides Trump himself thinks this is a good idea.
The impact that it had on my children is that they're scared. They're scared that there are coming American soldiers to Greenland, and they're asking me questions that I can't answer.
So, Greenland's roughly 56,000 inhabitants have found themselves at the center of a growing rift between the US and Europe. Donald Trump has been stepping up his threats, going from potential military intervention to tariff ultimatums, saying he'll impose 10% on European countries who stand in his way. Greenland was on everyone's minds at the recent Davos summit. In a speech to world leaders, Trump backed down from his previous threat of taking Greenland by force.
That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
But he's not giving up on the Greenland goal. Let's watch a reminder of where all this started before we discuss where it might lead.
Donald Trump's fixation with acquiring Greenland goes back to his first term.
Essentially, it's a large real estate deal. A lot of things could be done.
He also added that it was not number one on the burner. Back then, his remarks were taken as a joke. But in his second term, things have changed. Shortly after winning re-election, he revived his ambitions, refusing to rule out military force.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us what is the strategy?
I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two.
A year later, the Greenland talk has become far less contemplative, seemingly emboldened by the audacious capture of Nicolas Maduro.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. But if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
Denmark stopped colonizing Greenland in 1953. Its current status is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, a fact that the Trump administration has started to publicly doubt.
The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? Obviously, Greenland should be part of the United States.
Greenland and Denmark strongly disagree. A meeting in Washington with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance offered no diplomatic breakthrough. The foreign ministers said they would work with the U.S. while staying firm in their position.
It's clear that the president has this wish of conquering over Greenland. We made it very, very clear that this is not in the interest of the kingdom.
Their view reflects their people's. Recent polls in Greenland show an overwhelming majority reject the idea of joining the US.
Hands off Greenland. Greenland is ours, and we have been here for many, many years, and we will keep being here.
We're not for sale. We are independent.
Since he took Venezuela, it has been an emotional roller coaster, because after he began making statements that we're going to have Greenland the hard or the easy way, so it has been very, very couple of challenging days where there has been a lot of uncertainty on what we should do, what we should prepare for.
Well, like it or not, the former real estate mogul turned president has his sights firmly set on what would be the largest territorial acquisition in US history. But US voters don't share his enthusiasm. A recent poll said only 17% of Americans support a takeover.
Are you excited at all by the prospect of Greenland becoming part of the US?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Part of Denmark.
What would your message be then to the president on Greenland?
Just let it go. Like, I'd like to say a whole bunch of really nasty things, but just let it go. Like, no, just don't do this. It's not going to gain us anything other than just looking like some power-hungry group of people. Yeah, I mean, we are making us look like bullies. I don't want that to be people's perception of America.
Is it becoming that, do you think?
Oh, I think we're way past that. Yeah, we've definitely become personified as the bullies, doing anything we want, knocking over anything we want, taking anything we want, hurting and whoever we want. And that's just not right.
I don't think we need Greenland as part of America. I guess we have to respect the culture and tradition of other countries. They belong to Europe.
Trump doesn't think so.
What we can do.
Bases there already. Why do we got to try and take it away? It's not right.
Trump wants it, though. Do you think he's going to take it by any means?
You can't get everything you want.
So what would be your message to him on Greenland?
Don't do it. You know, if they wanted to be part of us, they would be a part of us already. It's an independent country. Next thing is England and France and then all these other countries. So we need to say enough's enough.
Even Trump's strongest allies were having a hard time with the Greenland push. In an interview with US House Speaker Mike Johnson, Nigel Farage, the leader of Britain's right-wing populist Reform UK party, didn't hold back.
But to have a US president threatening tariffs, unless we agree that he can take over Greenland by some means, without, it seems, even getting the consent of the people of Greenland. I mean, this is a very hostile act. There's no other way I can put it.
Then came a softening. After what he called a productive meeting with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, President Trump said he will not be imposing his planned tariffs on European countries.
The tariffs are off. Nothing happens on February 1st.
No, we took that off because it looks like we have pretty much a concept of a deal.
But anyone who's dealt with mercurial Donald Trump knows anything can happen. And for many, the damage to transatlantic trust has already been done.
Greenland is, of course, a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark used to count the US as its #1 ally, but now there's disbelief and sadness that the nature of the relationship has changed so much. Rufus Gifford was the US ambassador to Denmark under President Obama, an era of warmth and mutual respect. I asked him if he ever imagined this level of hostility could be possible.
It's quite extraordinary, the manner in which the Trump administration conducts foreign policy. And I think it is forgetting history. It's forgetting our alliances. These countries like Denmark, like Greenland, that have marched in lockstep with the United States on issue after issue, especially, but not limited to, but especially since the end of World War II. So it breaks my heart to see this alliance that has meant so much to us as Americans treated the way that the Trump administration treats it.
Yeah, you received a letter recently, didn't you, which really speaks to that decades of trust relationship. Obviously, Danish troops fought alongside US troops. You had this letter from a Danish soldier. I'll just read a small excerpt that I think we can see here. When the US today calls Denmark a poor ally, it feels like a slap in the face to those of us who were actually there. After 9/11, Denmark did not hesitate. How deep does this run?
And this is the thing that I want Americans to understand, is that this is more than a disagreement between world leaders. This is more than a disagreement between Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Denmark or whatever that may be. This hits our allies to the core. That letter did move me. And what's wonderful is that the sentiments in that letter moved a lot of people, as it's really gotten a lot of traction on both sides of the Atlantic. And it ends... You read a beautiful part, but it ends with something that really sticks with me. It ends with him saying, soldiers never forget who stood by their side. Nations shouldn't either. And I think from a Danish military standpoint, they were a country that lost more young men and women in Afghanistan per capita than any country in the world, with the exception of the United States. They valued that sacrifice. They would do it again tomorrow, or they asked, and they just asked to be treated with a little honesty and a little respect. And they're not getting that from the Trump administration. So it is that sentiment is very, very rich and real on the streets of certainly of Denmark, but I would argue across Europe as well.
Let's discuss the US perspective here. They say it's a national security situation, that essentially if the US doesn't take over Greenland, then Russia or China will. Is that true?
Amanda, it misunderstands or misinterprets or doesn't care to know what NATO is. And so it's ridiculously flawed reasoning. So the truth is, today, 5 years ago or 60 years ago, were Greenland invaded, God forbid, by one of our collective adversaries, Article 5 would be invoked, and the entire alliance would be compelled to respond. So the national security argument doesn't hold water, and not just for that reason. It's also, we have an agreement with the Kingdom of Denmark that in essence we could build as many military installations as we wanted to on Greenland. We used to have 17. It was an American decision to scale that back to just one in present day. And the third, to me, it just makes no logical sense to make a national security argument about a situation that drives a stake through the heart of NATO, one of the most successful, if not the most successful modern alliances. Then all that would do is empower our adversaries, say the Russians or the Chinese, which only makes the West less safe, including the United States.
So you alluded to it there. The US has a huge military base in Greenland. It has a defense agreement. It has military access. So what is actually behind this, do you think, when you take all of that into account? Has Donald Trump looked at a world map and thought, wow, that looks nice. This makes America bigger. What a beautiful idea. He's a former real estate mogul, after all. Is this about ownership?
Amanda, it's hard to know specifically what's motivating him. I think the biggest clue that I have is the Trump administration has kind of equated Venezuela, the action to go in and remove Maduro from Venezuela, with Greenland. I think the two issues have almost nothing in common for a variety of different reasons that we don't need to go into. I think most of them are obvious, but they have two things that they do have in common. One is access to natural resources. Venezuela famously has oil, and Greenland famously has perhaps oil and gas, but more notably rare earth mineral deposits that are undiscovered. And separate, and I would argue more importantly, it's this idea that the Trump administration is pushing more openly these days, is this idea of Western Hemisphere domination. And so that, to me, because the national security argument doesn't make any sense considering the state of the world, that is the only logical explanation as far as I'm concerned.
And where do you stand on the Danish Prime Minister's perspective that if there was a US military takeover, that would be the end of NATO? How does that play out?
It's hard to understand how an organization, an alliance like NATO, could survive if one ally hostilely engages another. The alliance was not built for that. So it's hard to understand how it could possibly sustain an attack like that. So I don't know. I obviously you hate to say that this would be the end of NATO and use terms as stark as that, but from where I sit, I think it's hard to see how the alliance could survive. Especially considering, look, we have had the Danes say that Greenland is not for sale. The Greenlanders have said Greenland is not for sale. As recently as a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister of Greenland has said, we will never be American. So the only way, it seems, that Donald Trump could achieve his goal is through some sort of hostile maneuver. And I think it is hard to see how NATO survives that.
And from the Danish and Greenland perspective, it's a Herculean diplomatic effort, isn't it? And we saw the recent meeting at the White House between the foreign ministers and Vice President and Secretary of State. Did you hear much about what happened behind the scenes there?
Not just anecdotal information. I think we got a pretty decent readout. I think that I will say this, that Lars Løkke Rasmussen, who's the Danish foreign minister, was I worked with very closely when I was ambassador. He was prime minister for part of my time there. He's an extremely savvy diplomat. This is an unprecedented situation, so I don't know that there's anyone who's well prepared to deal with a situation quite like this. But I think he understands the stakes here, and will certainly be a negotiator in good faith with the United States, and also make sure that they remain true to their interests, just as I would hope the American side would.
Do you fear the worst here?
I can't. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe that you look at polling numbers in the United States that came out, I think it was just yesterday, only 17% of Americans support Trump's desire to take Greenland in any way, including purchase, and only 4% support any sort of military action. And those are terrible numbers by American standards. You can't get it is very, very rare that you can get people to agree in the manner in which that poll represents. So I think that we are winning this conversation, meaning I do think that we need to elevate the issue because a lot of Americans don't understand the stakes here for understandable reasons. But we need to make sure we articulate them and we tell our story here, because it is, to me, this is ultimately about protecting American national security and our role in the world, and not just one man's interests. I believe that my side of this conversation is about American interests, and I believe their side is about one man's interests, and that is something that I look forward to continuing to articulate.
So, former US Ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford there, offering his take on what's behind Donald Trump's desire to take over Greenland. Natural resources, Western Hemisphere domination, or national security, some of the ideas out there. But there's another possible motive involving the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's discuss that and more with our panel. Christine Balling is Senior Vice President at the Institute of World Politics. And we're also joined by Democratic strategist and former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, Richard Goodstein. Richard, let me start with you. So we had this report the other day of a text message which suggested that Donald Trump not winning the Nobel Peace Prize was a factor at play here. Do you buy that?
Of course. I mean, he said it. Look, trying to figure out exactly what motivates Donald Trump around things like this is a science. And I think most people haven't mastered it yet. I mean, initially he said, well, it was because Greenland was close to the United States. Maybe he hasn't looked at a globe, but Alaska is 55 miles from Russia. Okay, so we already have, property that's closer to Russia than Greenland is to the United States. So somehow that doesn't make sense. Natural resources. We have a treaty to develop natural resources already. We don't need to take it over to develop the natural resources. In terms of a military base, J.D. Vance visited that military base within the past year. So he knows firsthand because he was there, and we had 15 military bases before, some of which got closed when Trump was first president. So I don't think any of it makes sense.
Christine, what about that? So military base, military access, defense agreement, what is actually lacking in terms of security right now?
Well, we do have one base. There are a couple things. Greenland has been of military and intelligence importance for quite some time. This is not news. And essentially, if we are to build a robust missile defense program, aka the Golden Dome, the one base we have, while it's important, is not enough. Number one. Number two, as a consequence of global warming, a shipping channel is opening up there. So the United States has to make sure that we can control those shipping passages so that China and Russia don't benefit from that new passageway.
You have foreign ministers who were in DC recently from Denmark and Greenland, essentially saying we refute the idea that Russia is this imminent threat. Do you think that this is a reverse problem when you've got NATO effectively in jeopardy because of what's happening here, which is delighting the Russians?
Well, first of all, I have to say I trust our intelligence capabilities more than another country's, number one. And number two, it would be too late to, if there were an imminent threat, then it's too late to do anything. This is very forward-looking. This is making sure that there is superiority in the hemisphere ahead of time. And frankly, I'm sort of surprised. I will acknowledge that Trump's rhetoric is at times quite offensive. But the bottom line is a strong United States is good news for NATO. It's not bad news.
So let me talk about that strength business. Is the United States stronger with a NATO or without it? Because I would suggest we've now had 80 years since World War II of peace, which is the longest stretch of peace since the fall of the Roman Empire. That's in large part because of NATO. Trump, he's going to blow up NATO. He probably has already. You tell me what head of state in a Western European country today would say, if the chips were down, I can count on the United States and Donald Trump to support me. I think the answer is none of them.
Which is delighting Russia.
Exactly. They're thrilled by this. It's beyond their wildest dreams. I just think, even from the defense, from this dome standpoint, we have no reason to think that Greenland wouldn't cooperate with us. And incidentally, does that argue for us militarily or otherwise taking over Canada? Because we'll need them for this dome as well. So it's just all nonsense.
What do you both make of this walk back of the military threat?
Well, I think that, again, it's Trump says crazy, outlandish things that he often walks back. It's an opening gambit. It's his way of negotiation. And it's not sophisticated, but it sometimes works. And I think, frankly, I mean, the bottom line is this is an excellent test for NATO. I'm optimistic that a deal will be reached. It won't require military force. And then it will actually prove to the Russians that the U.S. and NATO relationship is stronger than ever.
But ownership is off the cards, say Greenland and
well,
Denmark.
it depends.
And Donald Trump isn't one for backing down. I mean, how is this going to play out?
There are very different ways of ownership. Now, again, he's the real estate guy he's using that terminology, but for example, we could strike an arrangement as we did with the Federated States of Micronesia in 1986, a compact of free association, which has nothing to do with ownership or statehood or territory, and that could be a great negotiation point.
Richard, I'm sensing disagreement here. Talk to me.
How is it a test of NATO to basically say, either the easy way or the hard way, we're going to take over one of your member countries? That's really what look, the Danes, Greenland's part of the Kingdom of Denmark, right? More Danes were lost in support of the U.S. after 9/11 and the wars that we've had since then per capita than I think any other country. Denmark has been there for the United States. You know, Trump said in his speech recently, or in a statement, well, Denmark got taken over quickly during World War II. The United States didn't help. The United States did nothing to stand up for Denmark when Hitler took it over.
Greenland is dominating the headlines. It's not dominating most people's lives in America. We're in a midterms year. Is this a political risk, Christine, when you look at the real priority, the domestic economic issues that people voted for Donald Trump for that are still really affecting people's lives? People we spoke to say, I'm not interested in Denmark, just stop. And those are people very often who voted for Donald Trump. Does he need to rein this in and refocus in this crucial midterms year?
Well, when he spoke at Davos, he did speak extensively about U.S. domestic affairs and including the economy. But the other thing is that as Americans, we're very fortunate because the general American does not have to worry about foreign policy as other countries do because we've never been attacked. And I think it's terrific that there is a president now who's putting a priority on U.S. interests abroad and trying to demonstrate to the American people that this is in the interest of the safety and security, prosperity of our country for the long term.
Is he making a convincing argument to the American people that this is all in their interests?
Look, again, this is somebody who said he was going to end the Russia barbarity towards Ukraine on day one. And here we are, year plus past that promise, and we are no closer to peace. And if anything, the attacks of Russia on Ukraine have been much worse. So that's the problem with this weak talk of his, that he thinks he's real strong and he's portraying something. In fact, the rest of the world sees right through it. And that's why Putin decides he can unleash this horrible attack on Kyiv and every place else in Ukraine and get away with it. And he has. And as far as the U.S. economy is concerned, Trump last year, there were fewer jobs created in the whole year than in a single month when Biden was president. The projection for this year in terms of economic growth is 2.3%. When that big, beautiful bill that Trump got passed, he said, well, we're going to have 5-6% growth. We're nowhere close to that. We have fewer jobs in manufacturing now than we had when Trump became president. So all these promises he's made as far as the economy, again, are hollow. It's just not happening. And that's why his poll numbers are horrible. It's why in all the elections that have happened since he's been elected, Republicans have basically gotten walloped over and over, not just in blue states, but red states as well, in Mississippi and other places like that.
Okay. Great conversation. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for braving this icy wind. It always feels like history is being written as we speak. Who knows what's coming down the line? We'll try and keep on top of it all for you. That's it for this week's show. Thank you for watching Inside America. Do join us next time.